So the Germans brought a whole ton of shit to America. Beethoven was German, Einstein's a German, Eisenhower's a German. A lot of Germans assimilated, so actually a lot of seemingly white people. But if they got those boxy faces and dark circles under their eyes, German, right? They're German. Johann Gottlieb, I guess that's his middle name, Johann Gottlieb Fichte, or Fichte. He's famous for the implementation of the American education system. The American education system comes from Germany. The entire system. Kindergarten is a German word which means children's garden. It literally means children's garden, kindergarten. And the entire Prussian or German industrial model comes to America, right? The university, the vocational schools, the teacher training schools, the philosophy, the psychology in schools, and the sort of the stratified type of elite ivory towerisms. You know, we'll get into, I say, a little bit. Also, Napoleon has something to do with it. Napoleon's got something to do with the Prussians. The Prussians didn't like that they got fucking conquered by Napoleon. And that's because the Prussians thought that there's too much independent thought. So instead of just sending a bunch of guys out into battle and they just do it like they're told, you know, a lot of the Germans were running away because they didn't want to die, right? So they needed to figure out a system which you could indoctrinate and inculcate people with just adherence to obedience to authority. Just straight up, just obedience to authority. And it's the Germans, right? It's a big fucking surprise. The Prussians, before the Prussians, you had, you know, it was a warlike society. It's always been the barbarians. The German barbarians are the ones that took down the Roman Empire. So the German culture, that's the Holy Roman Empire, and then that's Otto von Bismarck, and then Hitler, right? So you have like three main periods of German culture flourishing. Three Reichs. I guess this would be the Fourth Reich from the last 50 years. But the point being is that the Prussians, there's I saw some, you know, it's propaganda, but it was kind of showing that the Prussians under this king was warlike, under that king was warlike, and then, you know, then Hitler, right? So to be shocked by Hitler when you know the German nature, the German culture, it seems ridiculous. So okay, let's carry on. That's just a little bit about Germany, because I'm big into my German heritage, and but I want to pick out the good things, right? I don't want to pick out the bad things. But so this is why I know a lot of this stuff to be true, but in a bad way. Okay, so Johann Fichte, he is known for saying shit like, yeah, good thing that they're all obedient. Fuck the world, or something. See, I've seen a whole bunch of different stuff here, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to come right to what he was actually talking about. The Battle of Jena is a big thing, but I'm going to actually fast forward here, okay? So we have serfdom and feudalism. Serfdom and feudalism seems virtually identical. So here's a little European feudal system. You got the king, then you got the nobles, then the knights, and then the peasants. And the peasants are the workers, and that's the, you know, the people on the bottom for the feudal system. So if you're a peasant, then you're working, you know, you're on the bottom, right? You suck. So like here's a comparison from feudalism then versus now. So before you had monarchs and landed gentry, clergy, royal minister, merchants, vassals, and everyone else. And then, why ain't this getting clear? We'll come back. Okay, so serfdom, it seems like serfdom and feudalism are virtually identical. Okay, so they're near slavery. They're not slaves, but they're near slavery, and both of them have to do with the landed gentry and giving them a little bit of land. But in order to get the land and raise their own crops, they have to raise massive crops and split the wood and take care of the pigs and do all the other fucking shit too, right? So before you had monarchs, you know, rule by one, Now they say central bankers. I don't know if these are actually equaling up. Maybe this is the actual hierarchy, but monarchs, we still got monarchs, right? That's Obama and that's the governor. So they're still ruled by one person represents the entire nation. But that is also right that Obama doesn't really represent America, because the corporate elites, big bankers, central bankers, all these actually make up the owners of society. So they're the ones that are owning Obama. So I don't like this. It's too incongruous between the two. I like the idea that, you know, there is some sort of hierarchy that's going on, but I don't know if it totally correlates. Serfdom is the status of peasants under feudalism, specifically relating to manorialism. So feudalism and serfdom is nearly identical. It's the status of peasants. Serfdom. Oh, okay. So under feudalism, the peasants that were working the farms for the nobles and the knights and the kings and everybody else, right? Basically, the slaves keeping the whole system up. They were in serfdom, right? That's the status of peasants under feudalism. They're in bondage. I'm under serfdom. I'm a peasant in the feudalistic age. So yeah, serfdom and feudalism is identical. So good to know, right? We learned something there. Feudalism, the dominant social system in medieval Europe, in which the nobility held lands from the crown in exchange for military service, and vassals were in turn tenants of the nobles, while the peasants, villeins, or serfs were obliged to live on their lord's land and give them homage, labor, and a share of the produce, notionally in exchange for military protection. So yeah, fucking, we got landlords today, you know, slumlords, landlords, people renting their fucking, you know, housing, then to rent their bodies out to wage slave jobs. So I think that there's a comparison between, you know, back then and today, but not totally identical. The Prussian education system. Okay, so I've been calling America's education system the Prussian-Industrial system. So I'm kind of combining two elements. There's the Prussian German influence, and then there's the industrial model, which is the, you know, working by the bell, work this for an hour, that for an hour, get lunch. You know, everything's compartmentalized, just like if you're working at a factory. That's the industrial model. Also, sort of your vocational training too, right? So you got the industrial model, which you clearly could see why factories and corporate America would want to you know, fashion and manufacture American students to be able to fit that sort of you know, the happy slave model, right? They should be able to take their orders and fucking be happy and eat their fucking soup, right? And just chomp it on down and love it and smile and tell the world how they just fucking love eating. So I don't know what I'm saying, but the Prussian education system, it's a system of mandatory education dating to the early 19th century. So there's several elements, okay, that comes from the Prussian education system, and we're going to get this from Wikipedia, just some of the elements, because this is going to be what, you know, people are talking about when they say Prussian. And so Prussian means universal education, and so far I'm in agreement with it. Okay, yes, the poor people need education. We need Head Start and kindergarten and elementary, middle, high, universities. We need places of higher learning and places to study and research institutions. You know, we need these types of things. We want a literate population so they're smart, but we also want, you know, spots for our geniuses and our scientists so they can come up with the next best thing. Also, the Prussian system sets up the stratified social caste system. Okay, so there's a social caste system in America. The universities hold that. They're the ones giving out the PhD. The PhD was the first given out by Germans. Okay, so Germany's coming up with this education shit, coming up with the degrees, coming up with PhDs. And how do you get better? How do you get smarter? Or show people that you know what's going on? Well, you got all these degrees, right? So this all comes from the German-Prussian model. Now, so the Prussian education system, that's some of it, right? The degrees and the PhDs. But really, the Prussian model, I think, is everything. It's the vocational, and then it's the universities, and you know, high school, middle school. There was actually a middle school movement, which I never thought about, but that's because there was only elementary. They call high school secondary. So basically, there's kid education and then there's big kid education. But middle school's been making there's a middle school movement because the kids in middle school are substantially different than those in elementary and those in high school. Middle school, it's so I had one Doug Aulick said that actually all middle school kids need to just be thrown in a hole for several years until they get to understand their bodies and their hormones and what it is that they want in life. So there's that entire system came from the Prussians, and the Prussians is just there's no Prussia today, but it's that's Germany, right? So that's Otto von Bismarck consolidated all the German states together. There's like 39 German-speaking countries, with Prussia being one of the biggest ones. And Prussia and Austria was always at war. Then Prussia unites all these 39 German-speaking states in order, because of fighting and defending himself from the French and from Austria too. So after all these wars had happened, they eventually became known as Germany altogether. But it was because of Prussia, and Prussia is the one that brought them all together. So really, when we're talking about Germany, we're talking about Prussia. Now, I said that Prussia is dead, and it's true because we don't call anything Prussia today. Germany's a democracy today, and so a lot of the sort of militaristicness of Germany is it's pretty much absent because America has their military there, so Germany doesn't even need to have any type of military in order to protect themselves. In a way, it's almost like they're our serfs, right? We'll protect them militarily, but as long as they keep on giving us money. I don't know if Germany gives us any money or not, but okay. So Wikipedia, Prussian education system, mandatory education. So mandatory, that's interesting. Characteristics: compulsory attendance, specific training for teachers. So teacher training. This is a big thing for me because teacher training in Spalding University, and I would say probably in most teacher training schools, it was really oppressive. And how easy would it have been just to allow these future would-be teachers to teach each other, to get along, to become friends, to network with each other, to look for jobs and do important significant shit. But they're still treating full-grown adults like they're fucking kindergartners, getting 100% compliance and then passing that legacy of complete total domination, 100% compliance, complete obedience to arbitrary and absolute authority. So it's un-American. They're ripping out the souls. They're not telling the students that they're strong and to make their own decisions. Even if you peacefully assert yourself, you're not even allowed to do something like that. You can't peacefully intellectually assert yourself, and when you make non-violent revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. And that's JFK, right? That's also just basic logic. So that's what they're teaching in these education schools today. And where's this shit come from? It come from Prussia. It come from the industrial model. And so what did Prussia want? They wanted fucking cannon fodder for the military. And then what did the industrial age wanted? They wanted a bunch of dirt cheap fucking workers to throw in their machines, right? To help build the entire fucking country. So during the 18th century, the Kingdom of Prussia was among the first countries in the world to introduce tax-funded and generally compulsory primary education, comprising an 8-year course of primary education called Volksschule. It provided not only the skills needed in an earlier industrialized world, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also a strict education in ethics, duty, discipline, and obedience. Right? So Volksschule, Volksgeist, that's like the general people, right? So it's Volksschule. It's important to listen to this type of stuff because it's German words, but they mean something. Just split them up. There's Volks and there's school. And I think Volk is general people and then school, right? So this is just a general school, general read, write, arithmetic, general bullshit, right? Okay, so, and that's actually, that's third grade. Once you get the general bullshit, I don't even know why you're still in school. But let's keep on going. Lutheran denomination had a strong influence on German culture. Including its education, Martin Luther advocated compulsory schooling. The idea became a model for schools throughout Germany. Political motivations of the King of Prussia. Seeking to replace the controlling functions of the local aristocracy, the Prussian court attempted to instill social obedience in the citizens through indoctrination. Every individual had to become convinced in the core of his being that the king was just, his decisions always right, and the need for obedience paramount. The schools imposed an official language to the prejudice of ethnic groups living in Prussia. The purpose of the system was to instill loyalty to the crown and to train young men for the military and the bureaucracy. As the German philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte, right? Remember we were talking about him in the very beginning? Johann Fichte, a key influence on the system, said if you want to influence the student at all, you must do more than merely talk to him. You must fashion him, and fashion him in such a way that he cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will. And that's a big-ass fucking quote. So much I want to repeat it 50 times and highlight it 50 times. If you want to influence the student at all, you must do more than merely talk to him. You must fashion him, and fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will. So they're saying indoctrinate the student to the point where they're just going to act and behave the way you want them to act and behave. So they'll never have their own, questions and influence, independence, autonomy. Their souls isn't sovereign, right? It's not sacred. They're to be malleable, to be, formed and pushed around, and they want us to, they want the students, right, to be completely invisible, or to show exactly what is on your mind at all times, even if it means just ratting on yourself. And that's horrible, because that's Gatewood Galbraith, right? People, wouldn't get into so many trouble if they'd quit ratting on themselves. Compulsory education. So that's a big one, right? Compulsory education through Prussian ministers, particularly Karl Abraham Zedilth, sought to replace local control over schooling with a centralized uniform system administered by the state during the 18th century. Not until the implementation of the Prussian General Land Law 1794 did the state first attempt to take responsibility. Sorry for all that. Okay. In 1809, the Prussian philosopher and minister of education Wilhelm von Humboldt undertook a major reform of the Prussian education system, which was significantly influenced by this idealistic approach and still forms the foundation of the contemporary German education. In 1810, Prussia introduced state certification requirements for teachers, which significantly raised the standard of teaching. I don't know if that's actually true, if it raised the standard of teaching, but it is interesting that there's teacher training schools, and then they bring psychology. So like some of your social psychology and your social sciences are starting to come into teacher training. They still want obedience. They want 100% obedience, but they're using psychology to wherever they can brainwash you completely, right? But they also sort of, I don't know. It's weird because there's the elements of actually being a good teacher there. If you understand the psychology, then you understand, if anything, I would want to teach other people about the tactics of manipulation so that they'll never be manipulated. Instead, it's like the teachers pretend like they got a whole fucking, chest, a toolbox, right? Just a whole bunch of fucking tools in their toolbox, and they could just pull out any tool and fucking get people to abide by them. And while I went to school and I was, it worked for me, right? I abide by my dictators. But even though I abided by my dictators, the, it wasn't so much that I resisted. I was the main resistor, and I went along with my colleagues. I went along with the other students. Why the fuck should I start speaking out and being an independent fucking thinker when every person at Spalding University, right? It doesn't matter, Desiree, Luke, it didn't matter how smart the fucking person was, or rambunctious or rebellious you might have thought they were, but they kissed ass like no other people you've ever seen. So that's what we're teaching. We're teaching a bunch of ass kissers, right? You want blind obedience to arbitrary and absolute authority, so they're good cannon fodder for the war machine, so they're good slaves for the factories. But we don't have factories anymore, so that means you got a lot of fucking dumb fuckers out here who don't know how to do shit except for a bunch of obedient fucking factory work who can't think for themselves. And that's going to be a big problem down the line. So yeah, they went ahead and made it compulsory education, mandatory, got everybody literate, but they were aiming too low. Let's make everybody scientists. I'm sure it's not going to happen, but give them all the fucking options. If they don't want to be scientists, well, here's a vocation. Be the best goddamn fucking electrician or plumber or, a street maker that you could ever fucking be. I mean, education in general should just be a good fucking thing, but the schools actually fuck it up. My schooling interferes with my education, and that's Einstein and that's Mark Twain. My schooling interferes with my education. I don't actually learn shit in school. I learn outside of school. I learn, when I'm reading and when I'm paying attention and working on different projects. That's when I learn, and that sucks. So I go to teacher training school to learn how to be a teacher, but I don't learn jack shit about how to be a teacher. They just talk to me and treat me like a fucking student. And somehow you're supposed to break out of that mold, break out of that student mold, and then be some sort of fantastic teacher. No, I think the exact opposite is what they're expecting for you to create, for them to crash or fucking kind of rob your soul. And then once you have no fucking soul, then you have to be a dickhead, asshole just like them. And that's the only way they understand life. But they're the oppressors because they only give a fuck about classroom management. And I'm philosophically against management. I think I could lead the most and manage the few. So if you're fucking managing me, then you already treat me like an asshole. You treat me like a fucking slave, and I resent it. I resent people that try to treat me like a fucking slave. Spread of the Prussian education system to the other countries. In Austria, Empress Maria Theresa made use of the Prussian pedagogical methods as a means to strengthen her hold over Austria. The Prussian reforms in education spread quickly through Europe, particularly after the French Revolution. Was adopted by the governments of Norway, Sweden, and Finland in order to create the basis of the primary Grundschule and secondary gymnasium schools across Scandinavia. And actually, I've heard the Germans were the ones that brought the gymnasiums, right? The gymnasiums and PE, physical education. And that would be such a better fucking social club, the gymnasiums. Unlike Prussia, the Swedish system even aimed to expand secondary schooling to the peasants and workers. The German ruling class in Estonia and Latvia, which through under the Russian Empire were highly influenced by events in Prussia and Scandinavia, also introduced the system into those countries. Emulation of the Prussian education system in the United States. So this is the Prussian-Industrial education. This is when Prussia meets the United States, right? And it meets it at, in the 40s or 50s, and then the Industrial Revolution is the Gilded Age, so that's the 1870s, 80s, and 90s. So the emulation of the Prussian education system in the United States, American educators were fascinated by German educational trends. In 1818, John Griscom gave a favorable report of Prussian education. So 1818, it's like, the great fucking state of public education in Prussia. English translations were made of French philosopher Victor Cousin's work, Report on the State of Public Education in Prussia, right? That's what I was talking about. So there's John Griscom in 1818 is talking about how good Prussia is. English translations were made of the Report on the State of Public Education in Prussia. Horace Mann, who's like the father of American education, Calvin Stowe, Henry Barnard, George Bancroft, Joseph Cogswell, all had a vigorous interest in German education. In 1843, this is the date that I've heard several times. I've heard 1818, I've heard 1843. In 1843, Horace Mann traveled to Germany to investigate how the educational process worked. Upon his return to the United States, he lobbied heavily to have the Prussian model adopted. So 1843, that's the important fucking date right there, right? 1843 is when Horace Mann brought the Prussian system to, or that's when he was won over by the Prussian system and then came back and lobbied for it. Horace Mann persuaded his fellow modernizers, especially those in the Whig Party, to legislate tax-supported elementary public education in their states. Most northern states adopted one version or another of the system he established in Massachusetts, especially the program for normal schools to train professional teachers. So normal schools, it's a way to normalize, the oppressive teaching tactics. And I wish it wasn't like that. I wish normal school was to actually go towards normalcy. Because instead of, it's like education is so fucking vague. When you study just education for education's sake, it's like studying business for business sake. So it's real easy, really. So in business, what you want to buy low, sell high, right? And then you profit and you make a bunch of money. I don't know how much more you could just keep on talking about, buy shit at a cheap price and then resell it at a higher price. That's all business. So when it comes to education, it's the exact fucking same thing. Inspire people, get them to want to learn. When they want to learn, they'll fucking eat it up like, like a crackhead, right? Just feeding with a habit. If you can get that curiosity, right? If you get them inspired to where they're curious, if you don't do that, then you don't teach them shit. You ain't teaching nothing. And if you're forcing motherfuckers to learn shit that they haven't been inspired to learn, you're going to make them hate and resent you and the subject material that you're teaching for the rest of your fucking life. And that's really fucking unfortunate and sad, because it's doing the exact opposite effect of what it should be doing. So when it comes to education, we should actually be educating, right? We do need an education. We do need to be wiser and make better decisions, and to learn how to get along and understand our economics and our money situation, to help one another, to make sure. If somebody says that you can't make it in your own hometown, well, we need to change that shit. You should be able to make it in your own hometown. We're going to have more and more kids, so we're going to have more and more jobs. We need to have a coordination success, right? We have a failure right now. We got a bunch of businesses, a bunch of unemployed people. Oh, we need to put those together somehow. And if that means we need to start up our own businesses, or if that means the government needs to start buying more gas stations like they're doing in Somerset, then that's what the fuck we got to do. So this is right in 1852, Hornsman was instrumental in the decision to adopt the Prussian education system in Massachusetts. Soon New York State set up the same method in 12 different schools on a trial basis. So 1852, okay, so you could say 1843, 1852, or 1818. It seems like the most honest date would be 1852, because that's when Prussia got to America. He studied it 9 years ago and liked it and lobbied for it, but it wasn't until 1852. And then 1818, that was just when people started, when the Prussian model started to develop. And so that's what you have to look at, if you want to see how the Prussian model, the influences are today on it. You have to look at Hornsman. And Hornsman, see who he talked to, what he believed in, and what were the things he was advocating for. And if it was consistent with the entire, model, or I'm sure he's got his own philosophy on things. So let's go back to Johann Fichte, this quote here. If you want to influence the student at all, you must do more than merely talk to him. You must fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will. And that's actually kind of Machiavellian in a way too, right? Machiavelli 101. Here's a bunch of pictures of Johann Fichte. He was a nationalist. He was a German, right? I love Germany. Germany's so fucking great. It's nationalism. Germans. Yay, Germany! So the Prussian model, it came from the Battle of Jena in 1806. It was decided that the reason why the battle was lost was that the Prussian soldiers were thinking for themselves on the battlefield instead of following orders. So that's why the Prussians had lost against Napoleon. Now, all of Napoleon's people were volunteers. They were fighting what they thought for the revolutionary spirit. Napoleon also had the Napoleonic Code, right? So he would go into new lands and institute his own type of freedom of religion, freedom of worship, and, some of the progressive ideas that he stole from the revolution, and then institute a fucking imperial society. So what a hypocrite, right? He conquered new lands and then said he'd give them freedom. He fucking liberated them, but he was actually conquering them. But after he conquered the Germans in 1806, and it was an embarrassing defeat because Napoleon, he just dominated European fucking politics. You had the first war of you had all these Napoleonic wars because you had all these coalitions fighting against Napoleon. You had about 6 different coalitions. So you have like the first coalition against Napoleon, the second coalition versus Napoleon, third coalition, fourth, and then eventually the 6th. And the coalitions are like major powers. It's Spain and Britain and Russia. And, a lot of major powers are actually trying to stop Napoleon, but they could not fucking stop him up until, 1814 or so. So, 1806, Napoleon crushes the Prussians. And the reason why they thought that they had lost was because the Prussians thought for themselves. They valued their life way too much. They weren't willing to just throw their bodies into the fucking battle like all these French soldiers were, right? So the Prussian philosopher, here we go again with Johann Gottlieb Fichte, described by many as a philosopher and a transcendental idealist, wrote addresses to the German nation between 1807 and 1808, which promoted the state as a necessary instrument of social and moral progress. He taught at the University of Berlin from 1810 to his death in 1814. His concept of the state and of the ultimate moral nature of society directly influenced both von Schelling and Hegel, who took a similar idealistic view upon or using the basic philosophy prescribing the duties of the state, combined with John Locke's view that the children are a blank slate, a tabula rasa, and the lessons from Rousseau on how to write on the slate. Prussia established a three-tiered education system that was considered scientific in nature. Work began in 1807 and the system was put in place by 1819, right? So, I mean, looking at these dates, right? So they're talking about when did the Prussian system get established, and they're saying this is in 1819. And then they're also talking about how there's a three-tiered system. And the three-tiered system, I heard that the top number is 0.5%, and then the second number is 5%, and then the Volksschule is like 4%. So the vast majority of the fucking people are not going to be engineers, doctors, fucking people that you can have a nice professional life and can do really well. They're definitely not going to be educated to do those things or educated to lead, the whole country, the whole nation. The majority of them are just designed to be fucking dumb workers and dumb soldiers. So using the basic philosophy prescribing the duties of the state, combined with John Locke's view that children are a blank slate and lessons from Rousseau and how to write on the slate, Prussia established a three-tiered educational system that was considered scientific in nature. It was put in place by 1819. An important part of the Prussian system was that it defined for the child what was to be learned, what was to be thought about, how long to think about it, and when a child was to think of something else. Basically, it was a system of thought control and established a penchant in the psyche of the German elite that would later manifest itself into what we now refer to as mind control. So the Prussians were definitely into mind control, right? AK Ultra or MK Ultra and Jonestown and propaganda and manipulation using the spoken word, right? It's all Prussia, right? It's everywhere you look, it's all Prussia. Prussia did this. We're operating with a Prussian mentality. Even though Prussia formally doesn't exist, it carries on today in the militarized culture of America. So and also Howard Zinn says that the biggest problem with Americans was that they're too fucking obedient. That's the biggest problems in the world is slavery, war, and genocide. And those are caused by obedience, right? The Napoleon, people have to have a goddamn leader, and then they follow these assholes in the fucking battle. And some of these assholes wouldn't even fight the fucking battles themselves. Of course, they'll play with their toy soldiers, but we're actually living and dying the lives, right? And making them wealthier and giving them all the fucking glory when they're not doing jack shit. So, the education system was divided into three groups. So this shows you, what the groups were. So the Volksschulen, the 94%, right? That's the elementary. The elementary kids are to be educated in the Prussian model, just the Volksschulen. I know a lot of people that dropped out like 9th grade to go work on the farm and shit. So you learn how to read, you learn how to write. Now shut the fuck up and get out in the fields and do as I tell you, boy. All right, so 94% goes to Volksschulen, which is the general fucking school. But look at the tops, okay? So the elite of the Prussian society were seen as comprising 0.5% of society. So that's not even the 1%, that's the 0.5%, right? So the top 0.5% are going to be your fucking, are going to be your captains of industry. They're the ones that are going to rule over every fucking body and every fucking thing. And how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to educate them in the classics and the arts. They're going to make sure that they can debate and that they question ideas and that they question convention and that they, that they've thought about a lot of these things. Make sure that they're connected. Make sure that they have good friends. And if they profit or come up with a new idea, make sure you can profit off of it, right? So the top 0.5% is the elite, and then approximately 5.5% of the remaining children were sent to what is called real schooling. Right? Real schooling. Isn't that a nice fucking name? So it's real school. And when you go to real school, what do you learn? You learn how to do, sort of the bigger things. Your architecture, engineering, your being a doctor, being a lawyer, sort of your artisans and your merchants, your skills and trades type of fucking peoples. But sort of your upper middle class peoples, right? So, I know that's not a good definition, but I mean the numbers are right. So 0.5%, 5%, 94%. So half percent it would be your fucking owners of society. The 5% will be your it'll be your police, firefighters, your doctors, nurses, hospital teachers, sort of your middle class people that are well enough and fat enough that they'll tell everybody just keep on going, and they won't actually tell the fucking truth because they get the power and they get the fucking money. And as long as that class is happy, then you won't actually see a democracy. For real democracy happen, you need a bourgeoisie for democracy, right? Because the middle class, once you get a fat middle class, then once you start taking their fucking freedoms away, they get pissed off about it and they don't like that type of shit. So the remaining 94% went to Volksschooling, right? So they didn't go to real school, they went to Volksschooling. They learned harmony, obedience, freedom from stressful thinking, how to follow orders. Important part of this new system was to break the link between reading and the young child, because a child who reads too well becomes knowledgeable and independent from the system of instruction and is capable of finding out anything. So you don't want them to be able to study and learn from themselves. Self-education is actually the most dangerous form of education. You also don't want dialogue or them to teaching others or experience, right? All that shit is cut out. Just lecture, 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 direct instruction, lecture, repetition. Here's how you do the fucking equation. Now do 50,000 equations. Now you know how. Now you know what you're doing. Okay. In order to have an efficient policy-making class and a subclass beneath it, you've got to remove the power of most people to make anything out of available information. This was the plan, to keep most of the children in the general population from reading for their first 6 or 7 years of their life. Not actually real reading, right? They could read, but not for the knowledge. Now, the Prussian system of reading was originally a system whereby whole sentences, thus whole integrated concepts, were memorized rather than whole words. In this three-tiered system, they figured out a way to achieve the desired results. The lowest category of the system, the Volksschooling, the method was to divide whole ideas which simultaneously integrate whole disciplines, math, science, language, art, into subjects which hardly existed prior to that time. The subjects were further divided into units requiring periods of time during the day with appropriate variation. No one would really know what was happening in the world. It was inherently one of the most brilliant methods of knowledge suppression that ever existed. They also replaced the alphabet system of teaching with the teaching of sounds. Hooked on phonics, children could read without understanding what they were reading or all the implications. In 1814, the first American, Edward Everett, goes to Prussia to get a PhD. He eventually becomes the governor of Massachusetts. During the next 30 years or so, a whole line of American dignitaries came to Germany to earn degrees. A German invention. Degrees, PhD, these are fucking German inventions. The entire education system of America is the German education system. We say Prussia because it differentiates and it kind of shows, you know, the origins of the thing too. So I think we should keep Prussia, keep the term around. So Horace Mann, instrumental in the development of educational systems in America, was among them. Those who earned degrees in Germany came back to the United States and staffed all the major universities. In 1850, Massachusetts and New York utilized the system as well as promote the concept that the state is the father of the children. And that's an important value too. If you want the soldiers to be good cannon fodder, you have to rip them from their mothers and fathers. You got to take them, you know, out of their mother and father's care and love. You know, the mothers and fathers love their fucking babies way more than what the teachers are going to love them. So you got to be able to fucking rip them away, right? Make it mandatory, make it compulsory. Even have threat of jail time if, right, you're not letting your kid go to the fucking school. If they're being like Huckleberry Finn, the quintessential American novel, if you know, about a guy who plays hooky and doesn't go to fucking school and wants to have adventures all day. Well, who doesn't want to do that? That's Jean-Jacques Rousseau. That's fucking incredible. That's like, yes, that's what we need more of, but that's not America, right? America, it's all compulsory, mandatory education. We just raised the dropout rates from 16 to 18, so now we're fucking, you know, trapping 16, 17, 18-year-old who aren't going to learn shit the next 2 years. Their reputation is going to be ripped up and destroyed, and then they could have been getting a job and making money, and they would have had a 2-year head start. Instead, right, they're back 2 years. They didn't learn shit. Their reputation's all torn to shit. Bad fucking idea all around. By 1900, all the PhDs in the United States were trained in Prussia. This project also meant that one-room schoolhouses had to go, for it fostered independence, and so they were eventually wiped out. So they were against one-room schoolhouse, and the revolutionary idea of a one-room schoolhouse was that, you know, it kind of shows that we are our brother's keeper. It gives the older kids a connection to the community because they'll help the younger kids, with more competent learning materials. Not only does it do that, right, it connects everybody, but it also kind of says, we're all in this together. Why do we have, when it comes to the levels that people move up, it shouldn't be based on your age. It should be based upon how well you study and how fast you get through the level. So if a person was able to learn all that a school could offer in 12 years, if they could learn everything that the high school, middle school, elementary could offer in, say, just 5 years, why would we send them through school all those years, right? Why not actually just send them to college and start getting them on some thinking on some big shit? So the way the level should work, it should be based upon a person's level. So say math. Once you've learned how to add and subtract, then you go to the multiplication. Once you learn multiplication, then you go to equations and algebra, and then you just keep going to the next level, and that's how you move to the next level, right? So you'll graduate first grade once you get to know all the equations and all the English and all the fucking curriculum that you need to know. Once you get past that level, then that's when you get to the next thing. So I think that the keeping everybody in the same age groups, the idea is to make them all American and keep them all together. But because it's so dictatorial, you're not actually intermingling the fucking people. The fucking dictators actually stopping any relationships from happening, any meaningful relationships, and you're also seeing your friends and yourself become slaves. You're a bunch of obedient intellectual slaves. So how can you all really respect yourselves or anybody else for that matter? So that's a little bit about the Prussian model of education. Here's another one: a Prussian model of public school and controlling the masses. Opinion: it's curious how whenever someone questions a government-run school system, they will almost certainly be accused of opposing education itself. So you're starting off pretty bombastic. This is one reason why each legislative session, state legislators find themselves under tremendous pressure to properly fund and cater to the public education establishment. Most countries, as in Washington County, Utah, the largest employers are the public school districts. This translates into political power, and those in power typically don't appreciate being questioned. Clearly, many people consider the public education system to be a sacred cow of sorts, but almost none have any concept of the origins, the history, or the goals of public education in America. Few Americans understand that our government-controlled school system was founded upon authoritarian ambitions. State-directed schools find their roots in the Prussian schools of the early 19th century. In the 1840s, Horace Mann, Secretary of Massachusetts Board of Education, traveled to Europe to study the Prussian model of public education. He was seeking a way to change what he deemed the unruly, meaning independent, children into disciplined citizens. To that end, the Prussian educational system sought to take education out of the hands of family and church with 5 key goals in mind. 1, they want obedient workers for the minds. 2, obedient soldiers for the army. 3, well-subordinated civil service to government. 4, well-subordinated clerks to industry. And 5, citizens who thought alike about major issues.